So I have not talked about the Brooklyn Nets, at least in their own video, all season on this channel, and I think now is a great time to do so, because with the trade of Dennis Schroeder on Saturday to the Warriors, they are clearly shifting their direction as expected towards tanking for this season. So I just kind of want to break down this team and what their plans and thoughts are probably for the future here in the NBA. Before we hop into it, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Help me push towards the 2,000 subscriber mark on the channel. I'm uploading every single day, multiple videos a day on this NBA channel, covering all things NBA. Really appreciate it if y'all do subscribe. Without further ado, they get absolutely blown out at home against the Cavs tonight. They were down 32 points at the end of the first half. They have clearly all of a sudden become a very bad team. They're now playing Ben Simmons at point guard with a non-shooting center and Nick Claxton. No, that's bad. This team is not good at all and does not look like they will be getting any better for the rest of the season. I think Schroeder was probably the biggest reason, in all honesty, besides maybe Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, that they were winning games. But now they are 10-16 and likely will probably finish the season, if I had to guess right now, with less than 25 wins, 100%. I realistically think the rest of the season they are going to suck. Tonight was a very good example of that, admittedly against a great Cavs team. You do have to give the Cavs credit. One of the best teams in basketball, have been incredible all year. But this is a really bad loss for a team that actually shot 41% from three too. They shot 41% from three and still only scored 101 points, had 20 turnovers. Not great. Just a lot of bad, in all honesty, by this Brooklyn Nets team tonight. And when you look at this team for the season, you can again see how important Schroeder was to them. Their second leading scorer behind Cam Thomas, who is also injured right now, out for at least another 3 weeks. So that's another contributing factor to their struggles. They're not going to be good offensively with that being the case. And realistically, Schroeder was having a great year and probably will continue to have a good year in Golden State. A guy who's actually a pretty tenacious defender, shooting the three ball at a very high level, almost 39% per game on pretty high volume, 6.5 assists to only 2.5 turnovers a game. So a good assist turnover ratio as well. A lot to like from Dennis Schroeder this season. And I think, yes, he's a huge addition for the Warriors, but realistically, the Nets only got net 2 second-round picks because they gave a second-round pick to the Warriors in exchange for 3 seconds, and then DeAnthony Melton, who's out for the season. So obviously does not help this team at all when it comes to trying to win basketball games. So they basically traded maybe their most important or second most important player away for scraps, pretty much, is what it sounds like. And that's not great, but I will have to point out they do have a lot of future picks. I'm going to pull up their picks right now because I actually forgot to pull them up. But I think this is a great time to look at that, because they are very well set up for the future. And I think trading Mikal Bridges this offseason did a really good job of continuing to do that. They got 5 firsts for Mikal Bridges, which was pretty wild, considering he certainly is not a guy who, in my opinion, is worth that type of draft capital. But they have their own first. They have the Knicks first. They have the Milwaukee first, top 4 protected. They have another 2025 first, which is very confusing, but it's going to come from either OKC, Houston, or Phoenix. They have their first in 2026, 2 firsts in 2027s, their own in 28, a Knicks in 28, and Phoenix in 28, 2029 first from the Knicks, and their own 2029. Oh, 3 2029 firsts, actually. I mean, their draft picks are ridiculous, and they're only trading a pick swap to Houston and their second round pick in 2027. And that's it. Like, realistically, they have a ton of draft assets and no real outgoing draft assets over the next several drafts. And so they still have guys on this roster who I think, like Cam Johnson, shooting 43% from 3, good defender as well. Dorian Finney-Smith shooting 45% from 3, and another high-level defensive versatile wing. Those are guys who are valuable assets on championship contending teams. I think there are a lot of teams, pretty much every team, with the exception of maybe the Celtics, that would be like, oh yeah, those guys would slot into our starting lineup. Maybe not every single team, but those are very crucial, valuable players who shoot the three ball at a high level and provide a lot of defense and a little bit of, especially Cam Johnson, off the dribble stuff as well. The efficiency and value that those guys provide on the defensive end of the court and offensive end of the court is crucial to any contending team to have role players like that. And I mean, my Mavs would absolutely love a player like Dorian Finney-Smith or Cam Johnson to complete the rotation. So I would love it if the Mavs got those guys, but I do think one or both of those guys will be traded by the trade deadline, because realistically, those are guys who you can get 1 or 2 first round picks for as well. I think Dorian Finney-Smith could easily fetch a first. I think Cam Johnson could even fetch up to 2. Those are really valuable guys as well. And so this team, outside of those players, Schroeder, who they traded, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, it gets sketchy. Like, Cam Thomas is a super high volume scorer and a great offensive player. I don't know. The assist turnover ratio isn't great. The playmaking isn't top tier. He's just an absolute bucket getter, but I'm not sure how conducive he is to winning basketball. Nick Claxton's been okay, but not amazing. Jalen Wilson, I actually do like. He's not shooting the three ball great, but I think he's going to be a good player out of Kansas, but nothing more than a role player. Zaire Williams is a bust. Ben Simmons, yikes, not great. Keon Johnson can't shoot. Noah Clowney's a promising rookie, but I don't know how much of a winner he is in terms of playing winning basketball right now. This roster is really, really rough. And that's why building and accumulating as many draft assets as possible, as well as being as bad as possible this year to get the highest pick they can and hopefully get a franchise-changing player. Like if they were to get Dylan Harper, that would be an absolutely massive addition for this team to get a surefire franchise point guard of the future. If you can add a player like that, that's the type of player that you can really build around with all the other assets that they have going towards the future. And hopefully a couple of these young guys will pan out, turn into useful rotation players and potential starters as well, and they can start to build for that future. But right now, things are bad. And like, again, they just traded their second most valuable player in terms of on-off percentage, and maybe their most valuable player overall, considering how much responsibility he had offensively. And like, they didn't replace him with anybody who's going to play valuable minutes at all. So when you look at the numbers, it is just disaster in Brooklyn. And yes, they're already out of the play-in. Now, when you look at the league-wide standings, you want to have a bottom four record to get the highest percentage chance possible at the number one overall draft pick. And they are currently, 3.5 games above the Raptors, but the Raptors have been feisty. Now, the Jazz, Pelicans, and Wizards are all clearly tanking. So I think the Nets, with a few game lead on all those teams, are going to have a tough time being worse than any of those three teams, certainly the Wizards and the Jazz especially. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this team struggle maybe a little bit to get that fourth worst record, but it's not impossible. And now is the time for sure. Now that Dennis Schroeder was trade eligible as an offseason addition and stuff, now was definitely the time for the Nets to make the move to trade him and realistically to trade Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith in the relatively near future as well, because they want to have as bad of a record as possible. That is the best way to improve this team. And say what you will about tanking, I know there are a lot of people out there who are not fans of tanking as a concept, and I understand it. If you're in the Nets situation, it is absolutely a no-brainer, smart decision to tank. Plain and simple, it 100% is, and I think that is the direction that this Nets team should be going, and I'm glad. If I was a Nets fan, I would be glad to see that as the direction, because look, Dylan Harper, I made a video on the Detroit Pistons today. Dylan Harper is a very Cade Cunningham-esque prospect, the type of guy who you draft and build around and can build for the future. The Pistons are starting to show the blueprint for doing that, although they have had a lot of issues and a lot of questionable draft picks and some tough situations and things in Detroit, no doubt about it. But they're finally starting to improve despite some poor decision-making and not as many assets as well as the Nets had. The Nets have the opportunity to build towards the future, and they're going to be bad for a couple of years. But in order to have a bright future in Brooklyn, things have to change. And unfortunately for right now, that means they have to change for the worse. But they're on the right track, in my opinion, towards at least trying to build something for the future. That being said, that is going to do it for this video. I hope y'all did enjoy. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. If y'all are watching Brooklyn Nets videos, I appreciate y'all. So I'll be back with more NBA content very, very soon. I appreciate y'all. Peace.